On this week's GTA 6 o'clock, new information regarding GTA Online. There is an ambition of reaching up to 96 simultaneous players per session. The realistic details which should be in GTA 6.
You stole an alligator, put him in the van, and drove him somewhere he wasn't supposed to be.
You stole an alligator?
Well, just...
And prepare for flooding in Vice City. Now, Florida's flat landscape and low elevation makes it highly susceptible to flooding. It's all here on this week's GTA 6 o'clock. Hello and welcome to episode 80 of GTA 6 o'clock, the world's most in-depth and best connected GTA 6 show. I am your host, James JJ Jarvis, and it feels like 80 episodes should be marked with some kind of milestone. So, joining me this week is regular host Dan Dawkins. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
Is that the milestone everyone was expecting? I hope so, because here we are. Do you think 80 is a big milestone? You're closer to 80 than me, so I'll let you answer that one.
What I will say about that is it's good that the episode number has now significantly outpaced my actual age. So, yes, I am probably slightly closer to 80 than James, but I'm still a very long way away from 80, I will add.
People who are 80, fact fans, Danny DeVito, Rod Stewart, Michael Douglas, Priscilla Presley. They're all in the same league as this week's episode of GTA 6 o'clock.
That's impressive. 80 is the new probably 60, let's say. I don't know if you're a keen Glastonbury watcher, but you might have seen, what is the octogenarian? 80-year-old Rod Stewart performing on stage with Ronnie Wood, who could be 300 years old. I will say they did look a little bit like two men who were 80 singing together.
They got quite tired.
Yeah, but 80, hats off. And to be fair, we're right to look as good as Rod Stewart at 80, and I won't be wearing the same clothes as him because they are preposterous, but he is a rock star. Well done to everyone involved, I would say.
So, right, before we kick off this week properly, let's start with an apology. Yes, we're very sorry about the terrible quality of the images in last week's episode, and it probably didn't help when we were describing things within those images that were already zoomed in for us to go, if you just look right in the distance over here, you can see this thing. So, yes, to answer all the comments, they were taken on a potato. Without saying it wasn't our fault, please don't shoot the messengers. We did have a different producer last week because Nathan was on a very well-deserved holiday. So I'm sure he will tell you that if you want a job doing properly, etc., etc. But he is back.
I'm back.
Yeah, God bless you, Producer Nathan. There's even a bit in last week's episode we left in where I say, Producer Nathan, cut this bit. Obviously, he never answered that because he never even heard the episode.
He didn't even get to cut it out.
So, and then producer, our very kindly, very talented stand-in producer who just doesn't make the show every week, didn't hear my direct plea to cut my mugging as I failed to answer your biker gang question.
Wow. Well, yeah. Well, if you did manage to get through last week's episode, thank you, and enjoy some of those behind the scenes glimpses that you may or may not have heard. Also, thank you to Jam Jaw on YouTube, who, in relation to the image that we were talking about with the crops being on fire, pointed out that in sugarcane farming, sugarcane burns are part of the harvesting cycle done by farmers. However, it is very damaging to the air quality of surrounding areas, so is becoming less and less common in the area. However, it is still something that occurs, and it's cool that Rockstar included this detail into the world, since it is part of the harvesting cycle, though I think this could be a regular random occurrence we could see. Good bit of facts there. Thank you, Jam Jaw, and maybe that is just what it is. It's innocent sugarcane burning.
Yeah, so an actual, like a deliberately started fire, but not for reasons of arson, but for reasons of crop rotation, I guess, or whatever it would be. But that's a really good bit of information that I definitely didn't know.
Because of all of the potato images, all of the other comments are about how low res everything was. So let's skip over all of that. Thank you for everyone for pointing that out. Again, sorry. Hopefully this week will be better. Thank you, Nathan, for providing your expert eyes over everything and making sure everything is high res.
And just to quickly say, for everyone on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you never knew the difference.
Exactly.
So, wherever you get the show this week, we'll be back to normal audio listeners as you were.
So, one of this week's topics that we should cover is a new GTA Online report/leak. This has come from flourishes, posted on June 23rd, 2025, and it's all related to GTA Online. Now, if that name rings a bell with you, it's because a couple of weeks ago, we also covered a report from the same source, which was detailing how much GTA 6 may or may not have been rewritten in the production process. Right before we jump into this full report, Dan, any off the top of your head thinking about why, if all of this is correct, these reports might be coming out now so close to each other when we've had nothing in the build-up to Trailer 2, etc., etc.?
My most cynical, possibly realistic take on this would be, and this would be the same theory you would apply to the creator of a random hit record, is you need to strike while the iron is hot. So off the back of one hit record, as in that report about, what was it? What was the first report about?
The one about it being rewritten 4 times.
Yeah, rewritten 4 times. So off the back of the success of that last hit record, one might feel compelled to issue another hit record in the style of the first and share some details. Now, that's obviously me being slightly glib. It might be that, Flourishes has access to sources and has decided to share it. There was also talks of, I think, I can't remember the name of the creator. There was another famous person with leaks who said they would have more on GTA Online probably a few months ago. And I don't remember that report ever coming out. We did talk about that on the show, and I can't remember the creator's name.
Well, there was also a thing from Jason Schreier who said, I'm going to tell you about GTA Online in a report in the future, which made it feel like it was soon, but maybe it isn't soon.
Yeah, and whether these things are, different people, different sources, clearly what the truth will be, GTA Online or GTA 6 Online is in a certain state of preparedness. So whether they're all getting it from the same source or different sources, in theory, they're all drinking from the same well. If that makes sense. I feel like I've mixed a lot of metaphors with the hit records and the well of truth.
Yeah, pick that apart and work out what you think about all of that yourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I would say you should probably look at this in the same way that you looked at the report from 2 weeks ago. Like if you were leaning into that and saying, I believe all of these things, this feels believable, then maybe you would do the same for this report. Although I think this one is slightly woollier. But let's get into what it said and see what the outcome is going to be. So it's, again, written in French, translated into English via Google. And it says, according to inside sources, the upcoming multiplayer game, codenamed GTA 6 MP, is currently in an advanced stage, much more so than it was during the original GTA Online, which was developed between 2008 and 2013. Still based on semi-peer-to-peer architecture, network technology, internally called fluid access, would have been specifically designed to eliminate the feeling of compartmentalization between different sessions, ensuring a multiplayer experience without interruption, unlike the current system where interactions between players can be limited or fragmented. Significant advances would be the ability to perform free-roam multiplayer activities with players from different sessions without ever having to leave your own environment or experience loading times. There is an ambition of reaching up to 96 simultaneous players per session. However, according to my latest information, this figure is currently limited to 64 players. There is a little bit more detail in the full report, which we'll link in the description. But to me, as I said, this feels a little bit more woolly than the last one. And it reads a little bit more like a wish list than any solid information. Like if, for example, I was going to come up with a code name of what GTA 6 multiplayer might be called, GTA 6 MP is probably going to be one of the things you put on a list. But it's also makes a lot of sense. because that's what it is. So, read into it what you will.
I feel like, and I don't know what your take is, that was a lot of words. Now, a lot of this might be because it's technical jargon written in French and translated to English, making it feel extra wordy. Part of me reads that and feels like there's a 6-word way to describe what all of that is. But I don't know if I have the same understanding of you. Like, what would be your summary of what all that means?
Multiplayer is pretty much going to be the same as in GTA 5, but with more players.
Yeah, that's what I take from it. And will be more, quote mark, fluid.
Yeah,
whatever
quicker.
that means. Quicker, yeah. Or like low, quicker, and be more seamless. So that's what it seems like to me. It's basically saying there'll be this amount of players and it will be more seamless and load quicker.
Now, if we were going to speculate on that without having read this and say, what do you think the next version of GTA Online is going to be compared to GTA 5? You'd probably say quicker, more seamless, more players.
Yeah.
Which is my point of this feels a little bit like something that you could write down and go, this is probably likely. And if it all comes to fruition, I get a big tick mark. If it doesn't, you just say, well, things can change in development, can't they? So who knows? So I don't know how much to read into this. The 96 player limit is a weird number to choose. That's, going from GTA 5's 30 players. If you were going to do that, realistically, you might double it and say, okay, now it's 60, or triple it and say it's 90. But then if you're going for 90, why not 100? I think the problem, and a lot of you technical listeners will probably correct me, the problem with the semi-peer-to-peer architecture is you're not having dedicated servers, which means high player count is problematic. And it starts to become more difficult to manage. So not having dedicated servers for GTA 6 brings in the same problems as Rockstar would have with GTA 5, in that you just can't get a huge number of players into that environment because of the way the networking is set up. It also means that there's quite a lot of things trying to talk to each other, which leads to a lot of unexpected gameplay things happening. Like, GTA Online, when it first came out, was quite the Wild West. So that may or may not be, they might have fixed that for GTA 6, but I don't know about this. I'm on the fence. Yes, obviously GTA 6 is going to be bigger and better in terms of its online proposition than GTA 5. This doesn't really tell me anything either way, apart from what we would suspect as players and fans who are excited about the next one, that of course it will be better.
Yeah, I'm slightly torn on the technical nature of the language, whether it makes it more or less true. To reverse engineer, I guess, Fravolis's background, the website he used to work for was famous because it broke what felt like credible-ish information about the Rage engine.
Yeah.
That was written in quite a technical way, similar to this. And actually, you read loads of words and went, great, what does that mean? And I think it was essentially saying, animations would be more fluid and dynamic, right? Now, and this feels similar, as in there's a lot of words here with stuff like, semi-peer-to-peer architecture, network technology internally called fluid access. There's lots of gobbledygook, which when you boil it down doesn't mean a lot. Now, that either says because this writer is really good at making something that anyone could guess sound technical and give it a veneer of truth, or it genuinely is coming from, let's say, a technical lead or source on the team who shares information in a way that a journalist or conversationally you wouldn't, talks about it in a weird, nerdy way, to go, well, we've done, and you're like, oh, this is great information, and you sit there and read it and go, actually, that's just a load of jargon. But that's what my source told me. So I'm slightly torn on whether it makes it feel, as I say, more accurate because it's such gobbledygook, or the gobbledygook is used as a smokescreen for the fact that nothing's actually really being said. I wish I could provide a more sensible path through that and saying that, really. It might be nice. And again, this might not be a conversation if I have to speak in French. It'd be lovely to chat to Frabelis and talk about how he's got his sources and, what he can or can't say. But again, if that conversation's held in French, I will also be talking a lot of gobbledygook.
Yeah, well, we'll get a translator, a medium in the middle to pass everything through both sides of the conversation. Yes, I mean, if you are listening or you have any contacts with them, please fire off our email, gtavio@gmail.com, or they can get in touch on Twitter at gtaboclock. Lots to discuss, obviously, in the next few weeks and months around GTA Online and how it's going to change in GTA 6. So if you have any thoughts or comments and you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, please put them below. Next down, I want to talk about some small details from some other games that might make their way into GTA 6. Now, this has come from a post on Twitter by Nicky Tech, who puts a load of great threads together around lots of different games. They have just done one surrounding Death Stranding 2. Now, I don't want to make this, the merging of two of your favorite worlds, Dan, but we are going to talk about Death Stranding a little bit in this. They've basically gone through and found small details in Death Stranding, which I think is relevant to GTA 6. So we can take a look at some of them. The thread obviously served as an inspiration, but there's some other things that I've thrown in here as well. There's a lot to talk about here in what might be possible given the world that Rockstar is building. And I think the good news is that this thread and some of the other games that are out there shows just what is already in open world games. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to go. And some of those features could make their way into GTA 6, and this is how it would be cool. Obviously, those games are using different engines. Death Stranding uses the Decima engine. Rockstar has Rage. But it's quite interesting that these are both in-house, custom-made game engines rather than your traditional Unreal Engine 5 Unity type projects. But let's have a look at some of these details and see if we think they're going to make their way into GTA 6 and how that might happen. So the first in this thread was talk about sunburn. You can see it in Death Stranding 2 on the beach, where if you're out in the sun for too long, you start to get signs of sunburn. And I think we've seen, as we've discussed before, hints of this in the GTA 6 trailer, with Jason possibly showing some signs when he comes down from the roof. And maybe we get some tan lines from clothing as well. This feels like a feature that, if you were really reading into it, would say has been heavily hinted at in the trailers, so therefore it's definitely going to happen. But also, with other games doing it, feels like that thought process might have come from a lot of different creatives in the industry, and they would have gone, what would be cool? Well, we're in our version of Miami. It's very hot. Would it be cool if the lead characters at least got sunburn?
Yeah, I think the question is, it's a graphical effect, and then there's a question about how it's triggered. So is it truly proportional and dynamic, so the amount of time you spend in the sun affects how red you get or the severity of the tan lines? Or is it more of a, if X amount of time in sun, apply effect Y? And then there's one generic sunburn effect? Or is it gradations of sunburn? I'm playing Death Stranding 2 right now. I've not seen the sunburn thing in action, but you can watch it on the thread that's been provided. I think this will be in GTA 6? Yes. We've seen it on Jason's back. I guess the thing I'm not sure about is we see it on Jason. I can imagine it being a thing for Lucia and maybe for the key playable characters. Would it apply at a level of every NPC in the world is experiencing dynamic sunburn? I don't think so, because that's a lot to potentially to compute, and who would even know?
Yeah. I agree. I think the lead characters would get it, and there's probably some funny moments if you're walking on a beach where somebody is really sunburned, But that's like, it's not because they've been out there for the whole weekend. It's just because that's the model that like
Yes.
you can see someone who's like clearly affected by it, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, my characters get affected by that too, but not to this level. I can totally see that happening. And I also enjoy that was a pretty much 100% yes, which is a very rare thing to happen on this show.
All right. I can't
Nope,
ever say
we've said it. It's
100%.
100%. It's happening.
97.3.
Next up, and I don't know if you've got to one of these yet, Dan, in On the Beach, is what they call gate quakes, which is a gameplay mechanic that occurs frequently, which would make Sam lose his balance and large rocks to fall from the mountains. Essentially, transplanting this into GTA 6, this is an earthquake, or at least like a landslide or a rockfall type thing. Will we see this in GTA 6? This is probably going the other way I'm going to say no, if it's in this kind of setting. Earthquakes are extremely rare in Florida. Over the last 20 years, Florida's only had 2 earthquakes reported on land. That's according to the USGS, which is the US Geological Survey. And both of them happened in the Florida Panhandle in 2019. Now, depending on how much you want to believe about the map, the latest consideration is that the Panhandle probably doesn't exist in GTA 6, or at least not to the extent that it goes really far along. So if we're mapping that in a semi-realistic way, it doesn't feel like earthquakes are going to happen in GTA 6. Also, the landslide susceptibility is classed as very low across all of Florida. So that doesn't feel like it's going to happen either. But it is a cool thing that we've seen in Death Stranding. Could boulders fall off a mountain range? Sure. But I don't think it's going to be a big sort of landslide rockfall like we're seeing here.
Yeah, I've just started playing Death Stranding 2, and I'm 3 hours in.
I'm glad we're going to spoil this game for you as well during this show.
But the moment you refer to, there's actually like a significant earthquake / landslide in the first 2 minutes.
Oh, well, there we go then.
And it's not a spoiler. Like, there's a scene in the trailer that Kojima has shared where you see Sam walking along a mountain range, and it zooms out, and he's like a tiny little dot walking along a landscape. That's in the first 2 minutes of the game. And actually, moments after that, in the distance, you see tremors, and the land cracks and falls away, and your character sways, and it deforms the landscape. And you have to take an alternate route,
right,
or slightly modulate your route to get around it. It actually looks more dramatic. It does affect the landscape, but it doesn't fundamentally rewrite your route. It just slightly changes it. And it feels almost like a set piece, even though the transformation, I assume, is permanent, because the game sort of pushes you forward in a way that you could probably walk back there, but why would you? So I haven't gone back to check.
Sure.
But it's a really good effect. The graphics are brilliant. And so I think in theory, this could be something that GTA does, in theory. But there's a big difference between a huge open world full of cities, walking people, cars, etc., to a landscape that's literally just rocks and one man. And I don't, partly technical, partly for reasons of just actually getting around that world. It'd be such a major change. Similar to that thing we keep referring to, like in San Andreas. There's a big moment at the end of the game, like the earthquakes. But it doesn't really make a big difference. You could have a seismic event in GTA that's maybe permanently changed the architecture at a certain point, but I still think it's a big ask. And I don't see tiny dynamic changes. I just can't see it being in a world where suddenly this road is out and will be for 9 months because of a dynamic event that accidentally triggered it.
Yeah.
It seems too much.
Well, in contrast to that then, let's take a look at realistic river floods. Now, this is a thing that also happens in Death Stranding, and the effect looks like pretty incredible. Like I can imagine this happening in some of the rivers in GTA 6. Now, Florida's flat landscape and low elevation makes it highly susceptible to flooding, especially during the rainy season and hurricanes, which we are leaning towards some kind of natural weather effects will be present in the game, whether that is just storms, thunder and lightning, or whether it becomes hurricanes, who knows. But with Florida having a history of hurricanes hitting it, you could see that being tied in some way. Storm surges and heavy rainfall can quickly cause significant flooding, with rivers, lakes, and wetlands increasing the risk of water overflow into populated areas. Pop quiz: do you know when the last time Miami flooded was?
Yes, because I can read it on the notes, but if you ask me otherwise, no.
Well, I'll let you take a point then and answer the question. When was the last time that Miami flooded?
Well, I'm glad you asked, James. It was 2017.
It was 2017. Now, I would suggest that flooding would have been in the news around the time that we suspect Rockstar was doing research and development on GTA 6. Now, that's not like the other reports where we've had it entered full production, but as we've talked about before, around this time is maybe when they were going out taking photographs in and around Miami, doing all of that stuff, making sure, what is in the news, what things could we include in this, what kind of natural effects are happening. If there had been a flood around that time, it could have been something that they brought back and said, you think Miami is all sunshine and loveliness, but actually it rains a lot over there, which could affect some gameplay things. The building risk in Miami is about 73% chance of a flood, about 1.7 feet deep over 30 years. And the latest hurricane they had was Hurricane Ian, which caused catastrophic storm floods in Florida, left a trail of destruction after it made landfall in southwest Florida in 2022, September the 28th. Again, probably too late to be like in early development, but it is happening as they are making this game. And you would have looked at that and gone, maybe they've gone, yes, we already had hurricanes in. We could just make something here that reflects this. Or they might have looked at it and gone, someone would have gone, should we put this in the game? And how would we do that? And then what would it do? Does it affect anything, like you were saying, structurally or gameplay wise? Or is it just a natural occurrence that is really spectacular to look at, but doesn't actually do anything to the map?
The way, I guess, to look at this through the lens of the way Death Stranding handles it, and as far as I've seen, there's a scene quite early on in Death Stranding 2 where there's a storm, the equivalent of a hurricane, like a sort of dust stroke rain hurricane, and the wind starts blowing dynamically from the side. So what your character's movement is dramatically affected by the amount of cover you do or don't have. So it's basically encouraging you to get tight to abandoned cars and different things. And actually, the minute you do that, you almost feel like you feel the change in physics and movement because the wind's no longer blowing and your character's fine. But when you're directly exposed to the wind, you're fighting the wind. In as much as you can fight with the D-pad, but the pad, but it makes it feel like you're experiencing real physics and it changes the way you behave. Something like that feels like a thing that they could apply to GTA because it's almost like a moment of pocket gameplay where the storm might affect, I don't know, your visibility in the car, the road traction on the car. In Death Stranding, for example, you drive like a car up a riverbed, and when the storm whips up, the car barely moves because the water level's much higher and you can feel the friction. So I'd have thought stuff like that probably they'd look to emulate that sort of thing. Or did I say emulate? To do their own version of it because they were thinking the same way, maybe with a different solution. But the bigger question is, like we've talked about before, would that rain or wind or whatever permanently wreck or deform the landscape? That's a much bigger question. And I think it's easier, and this is what Death Stranding does, where the riverbed fills and empties, but it almost feels like when it fills and empties, it hasn't fundamentally changed. It's just the effect from state A to state B is different.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Which I think could very much happen in GTA 6. You could get, it rains a lot, and the next day the rivers are higher, and then the day after, presuming that, a day lasts as long as it does in the game, then they've gone back down again. And nothing has fundamentally changed. It's just for that period of time, it's harder to cross the river, or like one of the bridges is underwater, but you can still drive across it.
Yeah, exactly. And the stuff that you would see in real life, like, for example, my local town flooded at Christmas time, and then it took them 6 months to repair the branch of W.H. Smith's, for example, right? Now, would that be a thing, not W.H. Smith's, but another shop that you would see in GTA? I don't know, because that's a much bigger commitment to, like, representing something over time.
But you could, I mean, like, as we've talked about, and the world changing over time, you could do that.
Yes.
Not on, an entire street, but you could manufacture a way where one of those shops that you may or may not be able to enter anyway has now got a different facade on the front of it, and it's like, closed for repairs or whatever. And then
I agree. I think that like, rather than it being truly dynamic, but the illusioneering of, you only have to show one shop being really clearly affected and put it in the gamer's eye line to make you feel like it's all dynamic. Probably similar with the sunburn, where let's say there was a character on the beach who you saw in the morning and you saw in the evening, and they were positioned in a really prominent way in your eye line. You would see that character and then go, oh my God, all the characters sunburn. Not really. We've just tricked you into thinking because of the way this character works. And, it's all about framing and focus. I guess.
And it would totally help make the world feel more alive if those kind of things were happening.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting wet and water, clothing in many games nowadays gets clean when you go into water, depending on how deep you go. So let's say you're covered in mud. If you go up to your waist, your trousers are clean, but your top half is still covered in mud. We've already seen this in Red Dead Redemption 2 and other GTA games. So as much as the first thing we talked about was an 100% lock-in, I'm pretty sure this is at that level as well. I don't think we need to go over that one too much.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Death Stranding does this really well with dust storms, where your character enters a shelter and he looks like he's been sandblasted, and you have to physically or virtually take a shower, and then he looks all right again.
One of the things that game does have that probably isn't going to make it is if you're running for too long in Death Stranding 2 and have heavy cargo on your back, Sam gets tired and has to catch his breath. Now, I don't envision you carrying around a load of boxes in GTA 6, but there is, obviously, that is a good way to introduce a mechanic, let's say, of the weight training or stamina type thing that we think might be in the game. It's a good way to introduce that to, like, you run a bit and then your character has to, like, stop and have a little breather before you can then go again. The opening question I'm going to have with that is, listeners and Dan, is this a thing you even want in the game? Of, like, you're pressing X to run and then dynamically you run out of stamina or whatever, and you have to be like, actually, you have to stand here for 5 seconds before you can run again. Like, as a mechanic, we've seen it before, and actually, you can level that up in GTA 5. You level up your stamina by running for so far, and then you get a 1% increase of your stats. So it's been in the game before, probably just not to this extreme that you can see in Death Stranding, but it is in there.
Yeah, so like the Death Stranding example, I think it's pushed to the fullest degree because obviously it isn't just this, but the core of the gameplay is a walking simulator. So to make that mechanic deep enough and challenging enough, you need a really clear stamina system. So if you do like when you're carrying mega loads of parcels up a steep slope, it's sort of disproportionately exhausting. So you need to be able to represent that because that's the core challenge of the game. With GTA, that, like you say, you're not going to be lugging mega big parcels. You don't want it to feel like your lack of stamina is utterly debilitating, like if you have to run along in free roam or you're escaping from someone. But what I think it could do, like you said, is, your minimum bar of stamina is enough for everyday situations in GTA, but maybe you've got the ability to, like, push it to 120%. So if you do it a lot, you do get slightly better of it. It's a slight advantage. But I don't think it should be at the extent of your character's completely unable to perform menial activities. I think that'd be quite annoying.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, like the stuff that we've seen of Jason and Lucia, they are both pretty fit looking people. Like,
yes.
they could run a reasonable distance without getting tired by the looks of things. And I think, yeah, it would only be a level above that to go, like we did in GTA 5, where if you did the sort of the running activities, like, it would increase your stamina a bit. It's the same kind of thing here. It's like, if you wanted it to get better, you can do these certain activities and it might get 1% better every time.
Yeah.
But you're not going to run 10 meters and then have to stop while being chased by the cops and then go again. Like, it's not going to be that
it'd be
kind of
awful.
thing.
Unless, like you say, again, is a one-off scenario, like we talked about with other things in GTA, where on one particular mission, perhaps you are carrying something really heavy and it's a dynamic that comes in for one mission and goes away again. But as a persistent thing, it'd just be too annoying.
We've touched on this already, and this is one that I've just thrown into the mix that we've talked about on previous episodes with the city changing over time. Obviously, we saw it in Red Dead Redemption. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the map changes with both playtime and story progress. Like, buildings were getting finished, forests get cut down, the train line gets finished. I don't think there's going to be any kind of that kind of transportation construction in GTA 6, but I can definitely see buildings getting finished, things in the open world changing as you progress through the game. I really hope that it happens in GTA 6 in some way. It's been hinted at in so many of the other Rockstar games. I can just see it becoming a thing at some point, even if it is story-based, that, once you complete Mission 9, this thing pops up in the world that you've seen in the early bit of it being under construction. It's the Mile High Club all over again, and this time they're going to build it.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier in this very show, and obviously on episodes before, but I think that's the way to do it. And I do think it's something that surely they're going to do it.
Now, one thing that might be more difficult to do is this was pointed out in the thread that we've been talking about, in Death Stranding, if you put your birthday in, there's a special message that comes up and animation things that appears when the console knows that it's your birthday. That's obviously quite particular to that game, and I don't see that happening in GTA 6, that suddenly all the characters come together and sing you happy birthday and give you a cake. But it does feed into the thing that we've talked about of having a day of the week calendar, possibly. Like, one of the things that I'd like to see happen is, a Monday to Sunday dynamic. Whether or not it goes through actual months and years, who knows? But I think you could quite easily do a day of the week thing where traffic is worse at certain times of the day or certain times of the week, and then the beaches are less busy Monday to Friday, but on the weekend, when everyone's not working in the city, they're then on the beach and they become more popular. I can see that definitely becoming more of a feature and giving the NPCs a bit more of a routine, which is actually the next point. But I'll leave the birthday days of the week discussion to see if you've got anything to say about that.
Only that the feature in Death Stranding was actually also in Metal Gear Solid 5, and actually I think Metal Gear games before it. In Metal Gear Solid 5, what it would essentially mean is on the actual day of your birthday, if you happen to be playing Metal Gear Solid 5 on whatever your birthday is, you get a secret cutscene on the base where I think, what's his name would come out? The Troy Baker character would come out and just say, hey boss, we got a surprise for you. And they'd come out, they'd wheel out a cake and sing you a little song, and it was really sweet. But it was almost like it knew it was your birthday, trigger cutscene, cutscene delivered, everything is as it was. It's forgotten and moved on from. So that level of thing you'd think they could do. I get the more interesting thing you talked about is if you play GTA 6 only on Saturdays, is the traffic always worse in certain areas because you only play it on those days? To take it to the fullest extreme.
That's a madness.
That's a madness, right? But do you know what I mean? If the actual days of the week you played the game on reflected the real life reality of those days,
yes, that
would be
insane. But the flip side of that is we've seen posters in the screenshots that say definitely a day, a date, and a month of when the live band will be performing in the bar. So that could have been a little hint, or it could have just been some contextual storytelling.
Yeah, and there's a difference between, I guess, a a sort of date-free Monday to Saturday, Sunday calendar versus a perpetual, now it's October, now it's November, now it's... And like, because in theory then you could have like, it took me 90 in-game games to complete. Well, it only took me 60 because I slept less. That was a bit weird. It's a bit weird to reconcile. And also the game might do a huge time leap. You know, it might at some point go, we're going forward 20 years or whatever. You know, I don't know. We don't know. But
well, another thing that I think will happen is that NPCs are going to have jobs, or at the very least routines. We've seen this again in Red Dead 2, where you can follow an NPC during the day and you can see them wake up, you see them go to work, you see them feeding animals. And then maybe you see them in the evening. It feels really immersive to be able to have those NPCs doing their own little routines. So I think the dream of being able to follow an NPC to work, that sounds weird, not dreams of just following NPCs around. But I think being able to see them do, you know, they go to work, then on the way back they go to a bar, and then they go back home, and being able to like track NPCs throughout the world feels like it's gonna be in there in some form in GTA 6. You know, we've seen little hints in the trailers with the NPCs collecting garbage from the streets. I can see a full day-night cycle of these kind of things happening, that you would be able to go, oh, that person lives in that building, then they go to that building, which might be to work, and then they go back to their house. I want to throw one more thing in the mix here then, and it is that animals, as in the way that the people were doing, basically have a full routine, and they're able to hunt each other realistically. Now, in Red Dead, this has also happened. We've seen bears grabbing fish out of the water and eagles grabbing smaller animals. So I think they're just going to, you know, transplant that dynamic into the world of GTA 6 and have animals be able to just like exist in the world and do their own thing, or almost like systemically, where they're just left there and they go, you, Mr. Bear, could eat that wolf. If your paths do cross and these are the areas that you roam in, you could attack that without anyone actually looking at it. It's the old, you know, does a tree make a noise in the woods type thing? Like, does the bear eat the wolf if you're not looking? Yeah, he probably does. But he will also do it if you're looking at him. The interesting thing here is the most common animals in Florida. Do you want to take a guess at what some of them are, or have you already read it?
Shall I not read it and guess? I'm going to say our friend the iguana.
Yes.
Alligators.
Yes.
Some form of bird.
And birds. That's it.
Answer's end.
That's
Answer's end. I'm sure it's more detailed than that.
Well, the most common animals that you see statewide in the whole of Florida are deer, raccoons, water birds, opossums, and alligators.
Okay.
In South Florida, iguanas are about as common as squirrels.
Wow.
Which are really popular over here in England. I guess it's the same in the US. And frequent manatee, yes. And sea turtle sightings in intercoastal waterways and on beaches aren't out of the ordinary. All of those animals feel like, you know, tick, tick, tick. They're all going to be in the game in some way. There's nothing there that's like too big or too weird, or anything that, in fact, we haven't really seen in some form in like Red Dead 2. Like, most of those creatures already exist.
I think something, just very quick sidebar, something would be interesting was if there is a degree of a food chain and animals interact dynamically with each other. We know there's all these different animals, and there's probably a hunting mini game. Like, what would happen if you stole an alligator, put him in the van, and drove him somewhere he wasn't supposed to be?
You stole an alligator?
Well, you know, just drugged him, put him in the van, and then, like, for you know, an obvious example would be, and then dropped him in the middle of the high street with the people. Would he wake up and suddenly start attacking people? Or you know, you got a bear and you dropped him in, you know, the marshland or something, or just took someone out of their environment and dropped them into a different food chain. Does that upend everything? Probably not, because it'd be really complicated.
Well, he probably just is like, I'd imagine, well, I would say, yeah, from the development side, if that happens, if a crazy person manages to I don't know, put a bear on top of a car and drive it outside of its zone, just make sure that it's programmed to just go back to its zone. So it just walks home, essentially, before it does any of the other stuff.
But a hilarious NPC event would be you, for example, drugging a bear and releasing it on Miami Beach.
Would there be a Strangers and Freaks mission, for example, that says, go and capture an alligator and put it in this, department store and watch it cause havoc? Yeah, I can totally see that happening as a sort of semi-scripted event that is, all right, this is the one alligator you're actually allowed to put in your car. And now it's allowed to roam around the streets.
But our NPC's programmed to react dynamically to a suddenly awakened grizzly bear. Feels like a different thing.
Yeah, well, as you say, it's the illusioneering. If you did that in the confines of a small area and said all the people in this area at that point do run away from giant bear.
Yeah.
I can say, yeah, sure. Okay. Yes, I think the existence of a food chain is very much going to be in GTA 6. So I have one more thing to show you just before we leave, Dan. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to everyone listening in on this episode. Thank you for all your comments last week. Hopefully we have fixed the potato problems for this week's show. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you didn't have any of those problems. Congratulations. If you have anything that you want to get in touch with us about, you can email us gtaboclock@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter @gtaboclock. Of course, we also have a newsletter that goes out every week on Thursday, sometimes Friday, at 6 p.m. And the link for that is, Dan,
gamesradar.com/newsletter. Can I just flag that page has multiple newsletters to sign up to? You want the one that says GTA 6 o'clock. So to be really clear, you can do that at GTA 6 o'clock. Existing subscribers to the GTA 6 o'clock newsletter can share a sign up within the page itself. I will add, for reasons beyond my control, the sign up page looks a bit weird and spammy. That's being fixed. It's just to do with, we're part of a big company. We're using tech from another firm. So I think it did say something like, enter your business email here. That is legitimately our page. It's just, unfortunately, we're using tech that was designed for a different purpose. I wish it was in my control to change. I have requested the change. Hopefully that's gone through now. But please subscribe to the newsletter, share it with your friends. Let's keep growing that ahead of the release of GTA next year.
Yeah, it's not spammy, we promise. So, as promised, here, as like a kaleidoscope of all the things that you enjoyed, Dan, joining together. We've talked about GTA 6, we've talked about Death Stranding 2, and now I'm going to leave you with a clip from The Simpsons. This is actually the season 36 finale entitled A Stranger Things. Good play on Stranger Things there. It aired earlier this year and has a fun little nod to GTA San Andreas. Enjoy and come back next week for another episode of GTA 6 o'clock.
I don't want Bart and Lisa to be the kind of siblings who stop speaking and drift apart.
Yeah, maybe you're right. We don't want them to end up like Sweet Johnson and CJ Johnson in Grand Theft Auto.
I've never played that game.
Marge, when you grow up in Los Santos and Big Smoke needs you to move that powder, the game has a way of playing you.